At a time of deep division in today's society, we must come together for humanity's sake. On Can We Talk 360, we strive to stimulate an authentic conversation on issues that affect all of us in an environment of tolerance. I am Eugene Pettis, attorney and community servant. Tune into our discussion to foster a greater awareness of yourself and others. Let's discover how there is strength in our differences and an abundance of possibilities when we stand together as one humanity. Welcome to Can We Talk 360. I'm excited today to have a conversation with a friend and someone that I've observed really advance what we're going to be talking about, his vision of what we do with our food and how we can do it better. Karim Giscombe is the founder and CEO of Plant AG. He's been in business for about a decade now, really doing some transformative stuff. So I'm interested to bring his journey to you all listeners so that you can see where we're headed in our society as it relates to what we eat. Welcome, Karim.
Thank you, Gene. Appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Tell us, what is Plant AG?
Well, I'm glad that you led with that question because it gives me an opportunity to not only answer the question, but also speak a little bit more contextually about what Plant AG is. And in its simplest form, we are a controlled environment agriculture operator. That's what most people will relate to, and it's the simplest way to understand what we do. What is controlled environment agriculture? We build what we would call mega glass house structures. Some people refer to them as greenhouses. We do them in a distributed network production model, which allows us to not only cultivate specialty crops, lettuce, tomatoes, strawberries, and a few others indoor, eliminating a lot of the risk that our outdoor cultivation, which is our traditional or conventional agriculture, are susceptible to. It also significantly reduces the amount of resources necessary in order to be able to deliver any of these products that I aforementioned. As an example, with lettuce, we use 90% less water than conventional field-grown lettuce does for us to grow a head of lettuce.
How is that? What allows you to achieve that huge differential?
Process, I think, is the first thing. Process, and what I mean by that is, you think about outdoor, you've got, first of all, you're growing in soil and you're spraying water, all times. You've got sunlight and that humidity that's depleting that water out of that soil, so that process is continuous. In our dynamic, in our process, everything sits in a gutter, and you're talking hundreds of gutters in a conveyor system that is being watered by a drip irrigation model that is targeting the very specific component of that plant that needs the nutrient, in this case, the water. So it goes directly to the root in a very specified amount that we can control. So there's no waste. There's no water going anywhere where it's not actually being utilized by that plant. And it allows us to monitor the entire process with a much greater degree of efficiency than what you're getting outdoor.
Okay.
That's how we use that water.
Well, great. Interesting. In your greenhouse or glass house structures, is there a farmer walking around putting the fertilizer around there, or is it something more sophisticated?
Yeah, no, I love that. And the visual is I love that visual. That's the parochial image of agriculture that we all know, right? It goes as far back as we can imagine or can we remember, but couldn't be further away from what we're actually doing. Using the lettuce facility as an example, it is 97% automated. There are no human hands that touch any item from the moment it gets put into the germination substrate, then starts its journey through the cultivation process, all the way through harvesting and packaging. So no, there are no individuals that are walking around putting fertilizer. There's no fertilizer necessary. There's no pesticide necessary. I would say in the lettuce facility, the only organic body that's present are the bees.
One of the things I want to make sure we achieve in the course of this conversation is I want listeners, and we talked about this offline. I want listeners who, I was at the grocery store yesterday. Everybody's panicking because of the hurricane. We all go to the grocery store, 99% of us, versus the few that may be online delivering. And we're picking up produce. We're picking up lettuce, tomatoes, all the things you mentioned, and so much more. And I've noticed where it depends on the day you go, it depends on which store you go to. It's just a huge, huge difference in what we're taking home and consuming. Tell me what led you to start this venture and to dedicate your life to changing this industry of our vegetables primarily and what we consume?
That's a multifaceted question, so I'll do my best to answer all of the components. First of all, the visual of you going to the grocery store and picking up your lettuces, that's another one. You're killing me. Good. So let's start with why did I start this? It was serendipity. I was introduced to a gentleman by the name of Adam Greenberg many years ago, a decade ago, actually, as a potential investor into his company. His company at the time was doing something very intriguing in the arena of agriculture, which I knew nothing about, but it was focused on data. And, a decade ago, the conversation around data as a driver in agriculture, I wouldn't even say it was nascent. It was almost non-existent, especially to an outsider like myself coming from the world of finance. That conversation, for lack of a better way of saying it, opened my eyes to things that I'd never considered. And I think that's what you're actually speaking about, is what, as lay people, we don't consider, right? Because it's not a part of how we've been acculturated. It's not a part of, the things that we are taught as we're going through, the education system. So it was really eye-opening. And he asked me questions that I couldn't answer. And then he put into focus for me what the global fresh produce industry really looked like. And it was, I don't want to say, it was alarming. It was alarming to hear the things that he was saying to me, that I had a difficult time reconciling. So this conversation, it was a great dinner. And I know I didn't drink too much, because 4 hours later, we were still there and I was still asking questions and he was still answering. I'm pretty sure we shut that restaurant down that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, Gene. And then you remember, I came back and I said to you, something interesting just happened. I couldn't shake the thought of, wait a second, if what I think is this industry, this space, this process, that affects not only me, my kids, my family, but everybody, if it is really as fractured as the picture that was painted for me, then a couple of questions came up. One, how is it that all the major players and participants in the industry don't know this? Two, if they do know this, why is no one doing anything about it? And three, if they don't know it, which is why they're not doing anything about it, then it presents an opportunity. And it was the latter that, I can't say it any other way. I come from a capitalist environment. For a while, my LinkedIn profile tagline was reformed capitalist. So with that being said, I saw an opportunity, which was the advent of controlled environment agriculture's growth in North America, in contrast to what controlled environment agriculture looked like outside of the Americas. There was a big delta. By that, it was very straightforward. It was an opportunity to fill that void. and in the same time address an issue that apparently no one was truly able to or was focused on addressing at the time. So, long answer, but the bottom line is I saw an opportunity, and I want to be clear. I didn't get into this from an altruistic perspective, which, it's business, right? And it was just another pathway for me, having spent at that time just shy of 18 years in the financial services field. This was yet another business opportunity that presented itself. And it was one that made a lot of sense. I took about 2 months, maybe a little bit longer than that, really gathering more information, trying to understand and candidly, why me? Like, why did I see this and no one else did at the time? Well, when you decide to take something up that you've never done before, that you don't have any basis in, it's scary. And I'd be remiss if I were to say that I was anything other than scared, but the opportunity, right, which I believe is a blessing and I'm fortunate to have, wasn't something that I expected. And I definitely knew it wasn't going to come knocking a second time. So I had a choice to make, which was, am I going to pursue this, or am I going to stay on the periphery and do what a lot of people do, which is, yeah, it makes sense, but I was at a point in my life where it was the absolute worst possible time for me to say I'm going to make this kind of a transition and go after something that I had no knowledge base in. For lack of a better way of saying, it was probably a hunch. I was fortunate enough to have a very, very strong-willed partner, my wife, Allison, who, upon hearing what I had to share with her and why I thought it made sense, she looked me straight in the face and said, okay, so what's next? What do you need me to do? That was, as you said, that was 10 years ago. And I promise you, if she knew what she was signing up for, then the answer would have been something very different. But but here we are, about to launch the largest agricultural infrastructure project in American history. To the tune of $13 billion, 2,000 acres and growing. And for context, right, 2,000 acres of controlled environment production is the equivalent of about 500,000 acres of outdoor conventional production.
That's amazing.
So you see the difference there, right? And not only is it in it's the scale, but also the productivity, because inside we don't have seasonality.
Exactly.
We can run cycles all year long, whereas outdoors you are constrained, which is why the majority of the production in the United States comes from temperate regions such as Southern and Central California and Arizona, right? But there are issues that come along with all of that. So going back to the question you asked, it was an opportunity, Gene, that made sense. And then the challenge that I had was to make it make sense. Right? It made sense. I understood what the problem was. I understood the solution. And it wasn't something that we were inventing. This is something that had been done for decades outside of the United States. In the Netherlands, where this technology and this practice originated, the Netherlands, as little as they are a larger per capita exporter of fresh produce and greenhouse grown product than any other country, more so than even China. Like it's a very interesting dynamic. And the more the more I dug into it, the more, because I had to, again, I was learning. I'm still learning, right? Like, and I love that about this, which is it's so dynamic. So much is going on. There's evolution every single day that it's actually quite exciting. Not to say that, financial services and investment banking isn't, but All right, I did that for almost 2 decades. I'm halfway in on this one, and I am having a lot of fun in the process.
That's
So
awesome. Let me ask you. Um, I know some of the story, but I want our listeners to appreciate it. One of the things you've touched upon is what our fresh produce, is exposed to out in the open.
mhm.
Insects, the pests, all the chemicals they put on our produce in order to try to protect it and make it grow. Um, uh, all of those things are eliminated when you're doing it in house. You talk to seasonality. Obviously, I was listening to the owner of Buchan's, who was indicating, he tries to buy local, and one of our favorite restaurants up in Palm Beach, he tries to buy local, but given summer months, there's nothing around here being grown. Lettuce can't be found locally, so you have to go thousands of miles away. What is the impact of and I know you've talked to other big companies on this topic. What's the impact of relying on food chain that brings the food all the way across the country, all the way from outside of the country to what we receive here and pick up in our grocery stores and put on our tables? What's the impact of that?
There's multiple impacts, and if I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. The impact of the food chain as it exists in its current state today, to you, to myself as end consumers, is what I believe you're
Yes,
asking.
absolutely.
Perfect. Well, number one, the music will stop. It is not sustainable. That's the number one thing. And the issue that you were speaking to earlier when we just got on about going to the grocery store and what you see there, it doesn't get more apparent or transparent, probably better, than just look at what you have on the shelves. Look at,
Or
yeah,
what
so
we don't have on the shelves.
there you go. All right, there you go. The retailers, whether it be Publix, Whole Foods, Walmart, Aldi, they're doing the best that they can to get the item on the shelf. That's their charter, right? If they don't do it, they're losing your share of wallet to a competitor. So they have every incentive to get the product there. So if it's not there, to your point, it's not the retailer's challenge. It's not the restaurants. They're not making that choice. It's the supply chain that they're a part of, that they are also beholden to. We as a society, not just in America, but globally, we've grown a lot. There are a lot more people on this planet than there were 50 years ago. You know how I know that? Traffic on I-95. Which I try to avoid. But in all seriousness, there's a lot more people here, right? And more people, more cars, more people eating, more food. So the demand has gotten, exponentially larger than anything that was ever envisioned. And we've done a phenomenal job, again, as a society, meeting that demand, right? But as with anything, you can't do the same thing in perpetuity, right? It's just because we're talking about resources they're not regenerative, right? Water is a finite resource. Arable soil is a finite resource. So in order to meet that demand, we've had to bulk up or scale up that production, which, credit be to the agricultural industry at large for what we have now come to know as the norm, right? It didn't happen overnight. But just like with anything else, it's going through a phase of evolution. And that evolution is being driven by critical forces, elements, nature, resource depletion, that I don't have an answer to, and I don't know anyone that does have an answer to it. If someone can tell me how we're going to fill up the Hoover Lake Mead again and get the Hoover Dam back up to its levels where it's supposed to be, right? That I'm all ears on it, right? Maybe we turn the hurricane in the opposite direction and see what that does, but I can't control the weather. So because of these factors and the necessity to be able to provide the product, the agricultural industry, much like every other industry, has done everything that they can and will continue to try and deliver that. But the challenge of resource depletion is just not something that you can counter, right? So the impact ultimately is, you said it earlier, what you don't have on your shelf.
Yeah.
The step before that is a lower quality of what you have on your shelf. You know, this weekend, and although I am, you know, an evangelist for controlled environment agriculture, let it take nothing away from, and I've said it before, the agricultural industry as it is has done everything possible to give us what we expect. I had a beefsteak tomato this weekend from local farmers market, Bednar's up here in Palm Beach. And they tell you where they get, you know, all the products from. So this was from Jersey. So it was a classic Jersey tomato. Gene, I haven't tasted a tomato this good in years. In years, right? I went back to try and get two more. I got two more. It didn't taste the same.
Interesting.
It was, you know, let's say a fluke. I don't want to call it a fluke. It was one off. Maybe the ones that I got came out of one carton, one box, and the others the second day came from another box, and they just weren't the same. But the one that I got that was so tasty, I mean, bright red, dense. It was what we remember and what we think about a tomato, which is how we're going through life every day as consumers, right? With the memory of the tomato, the memory of what the lettuce tastes like, the memory of what the mango tastes like, right? Because once you've had it and it's really good, it becomes the baseline for you, and it's an expectation. But as we're going through our lives and we're not focused solely on food, we get what's the complacent's probably not the right word, but we learn to accept. Right. And a part of that acceptance is the placebo of you think it is what you want it to be.
Right.
It works, right? It's just human psychology. It's how our brains work. So with that, the why I brought up that tomato from Jersey is we've got to get I'm sorry, not what we've got to get. I was speaking about what's in the grocery stores and the fact that what you're getting today, what we are all getting, doesn't taste like that tomato that I had this weekend. All right, the lettuce doesn't taste like some of the other lettuce that is accessible and available to consumers, just not in the quantity that it's available and accessible to every consumer. Right, and it's
a question on that.
Sure,
I'm interrupting you. Sorry. Greenhouse process, does that allow you to, for lack of a better word, to duplicate the produce, so it's not that big of a variant? We've all, absolutely. I mean, sometimes you buy beautiful, perfectly yellow bananas, perfectly red apples, perfectly with the color that we expect. Amazingly, the food looks just like that, and it doesn't taste like we expect. There's fluctuation for the at minimum from one apple, tomato, banana, etc. How do you close that gap of variation when you're doing greenhouse produce growing?
So I love that you asked that question. It's a closed loop process. So the short answer is absolutely yes. We can replicate, duplicate, provide consistency in that flavor profile of every single item that we are growing or producing, I prefer to say, within our environment. It's because of the data attribution. You know, I spoke earlier about being able to measure the amount of water that's going to the root of every head of lettuce. Similarly, every vine of tomatoes, we are measuring the exact amount of water. Now, when you're doing this at scale, you get a lot of reference points, AKA data. Not just the water, not just the amount of light flow that's coming through, not just the amount of nitrogen that's in the water in order to help that growth process go through. We are able to measure every single input of that's going into that item 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and subsequently modulate all of these variables. No different than, you walk into your house and it's a 95-degree summer day in Florida. You walk in and your Nest system or whatever your fancy AC unit is automatically knows that at let's say 6 o'clock, temperature goes from, let's say you had it set at 78 during the day, and it goes down to 74 or 72 the minute right before you go in, even better than when you walk in. So now the temperature in the house is set to an ambient, comfortable temperature that you want it to be at. That is 101. That's the most basic analog I can give you to explain all the different mechanisms and variables that we can control, again, controlled environment, right, within our production facility. And that, coupled with the data of being able to look at a growth pattern of an item. So head of lettuce, if I grow 11 of these, 11 cycles throughout the course of a year, every minute, every second that each unit is in the substrate, I am collecting data on that item all the way through. Now I harvest it, ship it out. Great. Next one, I'm collecting the same amount of data. We live in a data-driven world, right? Mark Andreessen famously said, software is eating the world. Well, guess what? Now the world has an opportunity to eat because of software. We are able to create, I won't call it the perfect fruit or the perfect vegetable, but it doesn't get much better than this. And that is no disrespect or to detract in no way, shape, or form from that beefsteak tomato I got from Jersey. But again, one carton tasted phenomenal. Next wasn't as good, right? So again, yes, we actually are en route to developing what's called a digital twin. It's a process that's used in manufacturing in many cases. So whether it's for, a tire, whether it's for an aircraft or automobile or parts, from an engineering perspective, you can replicate, again, because of the power of software and data today, every aspect of that item and provide a digital version of it where you can do all your simulation, all your testing on, which then allows you to deliver a much better calibrated item, as for your end output. That's what we're doing with food today. And it does not require genetic manipulation. It simply requires an inordinate amount of data, the ability to capture and process that data. And then, our algorithms run this data, run these models, and it trains the system. So now we know, okay, if previously we thought we needed, X amount of fluid ounces of water throughout the course of the day, and now we've gone back and looked at these many cycles, and we can see where there's a variance coming in, and that's attributed to something. So then what our teams do is we're digging for what is the catalyst, what is the variable that is attributing to that change, or whatever is going on with that specific item. You do that enough, you get to a point where you have the closest version of near perfect that you're going to come to in any of these items. We're not there yet with the digital twin, but I anticipate, within the next 3 to 5 years, we will be there. More importantly, we are at least 15 years ahead of anybody else in the industry. And that puts us in a very unique position. And the industry, as I said before, is significantly more advanced in the production of these items than conventional agriculture. Again, because I get in trouble for saying this isn't me saying that conventional agriculture is bad in any way, shape, or form, right? I want to make sure to go on record. It is just like everything else on this planet. It's evolving, right? And we have to evolve with it.
Um, I did not address at the beginning, and I want to. I mean, you've talked about your vision and where you are in part right now. You've not just grown plant AG, but you've also had the occasion of speaking at the in Congress. What, a few years ago? I can't remember the time. Tell us about that. Who were you speaking to? What committee in our U.S. Congress?
So that was back in 2021, and we had the support and an opportunity of a lifetime. I said earlier that there are a lot of things that I'm doing now that just they were not envisioned and they weren't on the cards for me. So I'm very fortunate and very grateful for that. But Congressman David Scott, who at the time was the chair of the Agricultural Committee, we were introduced for the sole purpose of bringing to light the role controlled environment agriculture should play in the overall agricultural dynamic of America. That was one of the proudest moments of my life. I think my mom is still cheering for that every time she sees that video. And no, I have not worn a tie since then. All right, so we're on the same page. But the way we have developed this model, the business model, is very unique because it's a very, very capital intensive undertaking. And then I think it's important that people appreciate when I say the largest agricultural infrastructure project in American history, not just by size, but by capex, capital outlay. As I said, for our phase one, it's a $13 billion outlay, right? That's a lot of money. Doing that in the traditional sense of using your cash flow or equity capital to build, especially something from scratch, it's impossible. It's impossible. But I've got some really, really talented people on team that come from a very, very diverse set of backgrounds. And again, coming from finance, there were tools and vehicles that are out there that made sense, that if could be applied to this sector, could work. And we were fortunate enough to be able to come to a point of understanding how to apply these, and subsequently have developed our debt model. So unlike most other startups, as we would be classified, we are a debt-heavy platform, not a equity-heavy platform. The kind of debt, however, that you get is there are different ways that you can approach it. And at that point in time, the structure that we were using, it was only because it was what was available to us. Now, my conversation with the House Ag Committee and Congressman Scott was, there's a problem here, right? There's a problem that faces all Americans that we plant can't solve by itself. The industry at large needs the support of our administration in order to be able to address this. And one of the ways that could be accomplished is by affording all of the same tax benefits to controlled environment agriculture that is afforded to conventional agriculture. It's very simple, right? It's called controlled environment agriculture, not controlled environment swim class or whatever. It's
the same category.
Same category. So why is it then that if I were doing this, with 1,000 acres outdoor, the access to the kind of debt capital that I need would be a lot easier versus doing it indoor, which has all of these inherent benefits that come along with it, yet I don't have access to that. So our major ask there was for a broad line change within the tax code to reflect the inclusion of controlled environment agriculture. That's the basis of the conversation. The hearing was titled, Controlled Environment Agriculture's Role in Protecting Domestic Supply Chain. And again, role. We're not and cannot replace a lot of the crops that are grown, right? We don't do row crops. We don't do carrots. I can't grow a pineapple. You can, but it would be the worst business investment ever, right? It's not efficient. So to play that role, we didn't go before Congress to ask for a handout. We were in Congress representing the controlled environment agriculture industry in North America, and we brought along with us, not only our partners but our competitors. Right, one of the largest players in the industry was also at that hearing. You're not supposed to say the name of your competitor. I'm not giving them the advertising, so you have to excuse me for that, right? But they were there alongside us and supported the conversation, which is the United States government needs to take a very serious, conscientious look at our fresh produce supply chain and comes to terms with the reality that it's not sustainable. There are things that can be done to affect it in a positive way and affect not just the output, but all the tangential resources and connecting dots that come along with it. And it's got to start someplace. So all we were doing is initiating that conversation, which is a conversation that is still alive. And we hope to see it come to fruition. In the interim, most recently as last week, there was another bill that's being put before Congress for tax incentives for investment into controlled environment agriculture. Now, there's a difference between tax incentives for investment and tax treatment overall, right? Which is the former, the latter is what we are focused on. I am supportive of the bill that has recently been introduced by another group. I think it makes perfect sense, but it is different than what we are focused on, and I just wanted to draw the line there.
Let me ask you a couple of questions, and I have some other areas I want to go into. If you're able, some of the unique features, as I've understood what you're doing, is and I read in what was the magazine, Fast Company magazine, which I think is one of the top tech business magazines out there that we have. I think it was in March 15th, 21. It quoted you as saying, "You know more about your Uber driver than the food you're eating," which I just thought was very illustrative of truth. Are you working with partners that is going to enhance and allow the customer, I should say, to track the historical data on what they're purchasing and what they're going to eat?
Absolutely. That is I would say, pillar, cornerstone of everything that we are, not advocate, everything that we're doing. So primary partner is IBM. We engaged IBM back in 2018, and we're fortunate enough that they didn't slam the door and say, "Get out of here," right? The reason they didn't is because they had a platform that was focused on this already. It's called Food Trust. That platform, however, was a platform that was designed for B2B application. And what we wanted to do and what we are doing, and proud to say that we'll be delivering this come 2025, the application's ready. Next time I see you, I'll actually walk you through it. You can see it. But for a commercial launch, it'll be fall of 2025, right around Thanksgiving, on purpose. But we wanted to be able to provide that same degree of transparency to every consumer. And we're there now. It's 100% doable. It uses blockchain. We didn't build on IBM's Food Trust platform. We built on what they call the Hyperledger fabric. So it's our own network that allows us to take in this information, our data, right? We are providing all of our data from the minute the seed goes into the substrate, that goes into the water. We are tracking everything that I spoke about earlier, all the water, nutrients, everything that goes in, the amount of light, all of that information is being recorded. It's put on blockchain. The minute that item leaves our facility, we still have digital custody of the item. It goes to the distributor, from the distributor to retail outlet or a restaurant outlet. We still have digital custody of the item. So you will be able to walk into a restaurant and, something that, sidebar, in 2019, someone from IBM, pretty high ranking individual, we were having dinner, and he said to me, I think there may be a challenge or a problem with your model. And I go, well, probably a lot. Why don't you tell me what you're thinking? He goes, all of the data that we have says that consumers want less steps. They want more, they want simplicity in process, and they don't want to be forced to do anything extra in order to get what they want. I said, fair, makes perfect sense. He said, so with that, how do you anticipate getting consumers to scan an item to find out what's in it or where it's coming from? So that's a great question. We accepted even before that conversation that it's a big lift, right? We're going to have to market, we're going to have to educate and inform consumers of the utility of that. And then it's simple, right? But nothing that sounds simple ever is simple. Fast forward to 2020. By the time you were, sick and tired of being in the house and just happy to get outside, first restaurant you went to that was open now, and you had one seat here and another seat 3 feet away, you didn't have a menu, did you?
Right.
Okay, in most cases, they gave you a little card and said, scan that.
Right.
That's how you got your menu. Now today, that still exists in a lot of places. But more importantly, we as a society have been trained and are completely fine with scanning an item either at a restaurant or at a grocery store to get the information that we want. And I would say that information is wide and varied. You may want to know how sustainable that item is. You may want to know how much water it used. You may want to know, what's the sugar content of it or the iron content of it. Or you may just simply want to know, is it fresh? It looks good on the outside, but am I going to take it home and it's going to be brown or wilted in 24 hours, right? Because that's a bad investment, and it's happened to all of us. So depending on what it is you as the consumer are looking for, you have complete access to every bit of information that we can provide on that unit. So it was September of 2020 that I was having a conversation in Atlanta with the same individual, and we were having dinner again, and he scanned the menu, and I reached over, grabbed his phone and said, you don't get to do that. Remember, consumers don't want this additional step of having to scan anything. We both had a laugh about it, but now it's real, right? So now our platform enables us to enable you as a consumer, scan that item, you have every last bit of information that you could possibly ever want. And, to put it the way IBM has always said it, and I not only respect, but just love the way it sounds, you get trust. That's the currency. Trust, right? When you open a bottle of wine, you have an expectation. When you open a bottle of milk, you have an expectation. When you open a box of cereal, you have an expectation. So if we as a society have evolved so much and we are so sophisticated and advanced, why then is it unfair for me, for you, for anyone to expect that the tomato that I eat today will taste the same when I eat that tomato tomorrow?
One of the issues that I wanted to address before advancing to another topic is how long it takes for a lot of our produce to travel from wherever the origin, the growth point, to the table, if you will. Yeah. from my review, preparing for this discussion, one of the pillars of plant is to shorten that significantly from what we see around the country. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a major component. So food miles have, many implications, not just how fresh that item is when you get it, but the cost of that item is also impacted by it, right? Logistics, it's a thing, it's real. So if I'm, if a distributor has to get a tomato from California to Florida or California to New York, there's no way around it. It's going by truck. It's not going by plane. And the fuel, everything that's involved in that process has cost, right? So that cost imputed into the actual cost of that item. Then you have the factors as it relates to freshness. Any item that travels, any fresh produce item that travels more than 4,500 miles loses upwards of 50% of its nutritional value. And if you stop and think about it, Gene, it's a living item, right? That we harvest, and any living item that you harvest will ultimately die. So the longer from when you harvested it to when you're actually going to consume it, that product is being, degraded every single second. So the quicker you can get it to its end point is the better you can expect that product to be. So for us, the way to solve that is decentralization. So earlier I said we build all our mega sites in what we call a distributed network production model. All that means is we spent the time on the very front end understanding population patterns, population density, population migration patterns in the United States. So in 2017, we went and we studied going back all the way 15 years and plotting out all the way to 2050. And this is information that's readily available. You can pull this information down as a lay person. It's not hard to find. That data enabled us to have a better sense of understanding of where the concentrations, or think of it as a heat map, where people are most dense, where the density is the highest. And the reason for looking all the way out to 2050 is to be able to see what the Census Bureau sees as that migration and those patterns, right? So that we're not just building for today, but we're building for the long term. With that, we then selected the geographic regions that enable us to not only build and exist there, because all the environmental factors are a significant component. A perfect example, here in Florida, our facility is located off of I-10, literally on I-10, just outside of Jacksonville by about an hour. When we first spoke with the environmental control company, Priva, that we're partnered with, that they're doing all of our internal networking, I remember that conversation vividly. They had, significant amount of their team on there, and one of the most senior individuals, after going through their expertise and why they were excited, he said, "We have a concern." And I go, "Sure, what is it?" "Where in Florida is your site?" And before I could answer, he said, "Let me explain." And he started to talk about humidity levels, heat, and the cost of being able to cool the greenhouse to the right, temperature, especially during the hot months. And why he's seen other projects that people tried to do of a much smaller scale in Florida not work because they couldn't get these things on their apps. I said, "Yep, makes perfect sense." He says, "Okay, so where is your site?" And I said, "Georgia." And everyone paused. And I said, "I was just joking, but it's I-10, which is 20 minutes south of the Georgia state line." And and everyone on that call, and they're all Dutch. I think a couple of people were from Finland as well, but everyone just went, "Okay, good," and that was their way of saying, "Oh, you guys aren't idiots after all, right? You've at least done some homework." And that was 2019. Here we are in 2024, and we're construction's underway. So, it is what it is. But the food miles issue, which is the question that you asked about in transport, it's not just cost, it's not just product. degradation. It's all of these factors that you look at it holistically. That's the only way that you're going to be able to understand the true impact that not just plant, but the controlled environment industry can have on things such as, shelf life, quality of the item, the amount of working capital that, a food distributor has to keep on hand in order to get backup or to be able to source product, right? It has so many implications that it's a conversation in and of itself, right? And then you talk about sustainability. It is, every one of those food miles is a carbon output, right? Carbon, and the reason why we try not to use the word greenhouse and use glasshouse, which is the European version of it, is, that carbon leads to greenhouse gas emission, GHG. This was every last bit of the conversation while I was in New York for Climate Week last week. It's still number one on the United Nations radar, on so many other countries' radar as well. So all of these are factors that controlled environment agriculture speaks to in a positive way in terms of being able to lower and subsequently increase the value proposition to the people who matter most, which are the end consumers, but that goes through everybody in that fresh produce value chain.
That's great. One of the questions we have not touched, topics we have not touched upon, I want folks to hear it from you and your expertise, is the dangers that we are experiencing, and I should phrase it probably, the consequences that people are experiencing with the way we're growing our produce with airborne toxins, I'll call it. The statistics that I've read are shocking to the common folk. You don't realize how many people are being impacted. Tell us, in the way we're doing it now, which is the best, some of the best in the world, but it's not the best we can do, and that's where you're coming in. Plant is coming in. Tell us the consequence of foodborne illnesses in our society and the health crises that it's causing on an annual basis.
Yeah, I don't have the most current numbers because they're pretty depressing. But what I will say to you, the ultimate consequence is death. There are multiple instances of where people have died from, whether it be salmonella, listeria, and any of these things. And the FDA every single month puts out, their investigation table that any individual consumer can subscribe to. But again, I wouldn't say it's a complex. It's not a user-friendly document, and it's not also real time. With that said, these illnesses don't just come, and they are absolutely, a lot is attributable to airborne pathogens, but you also have waterborne pathogens, which are probably even more significant. Most conventional agriculture in America, and let's talk about just lettuce and leafy greens, those farms are situated in most cases directly adjacent to cattle farms, right? And what's going on at those cattle farms? Not just the greenhouse gas emissions that the cattle is letting off, but these feces go into the soil, subsequently get directly into the water stream because the irrigation is in most cases sheared, right? If you know anything about, if we understand California's water supply, it doesn't come from California. Right, so right. Everything is being pushed through. So a lot of these instances, have been recorded as coming from the waterborne bacteria. And to be very fair, even in a controlled environment, you don't by default eliminate that risk. You have to put the proper measures in place to ensure that the water is being appropriately treated and cleaned, sanitized, and not just the water, but the gutters. Anything that's going to come in contact with that item has to be treated the same way we would treat any item within a medical environment. It's that serious, it's that critical, right? But you can't control that in a conventional outdoor cultivation dynamic. You can do it indoor. You should do it. And candidly, I believe that one of the things, and not I believe, it's in the argument that we present to Congress, which is there needs to be a standardized process that has administrative oversight, regulatory, oversight into controlled environment agricultural processes, right? Because it's not all the same. You can go to a car dealer, get your car serviced, right? One dealership, same brand, another dealership, same brand. The service department, your service advisor, the mechanics, not the same, right? It's not a guarantee. So similarly with producers or operators of controlled environment, these processes have never been standardized, because it's kind of like the AI conversation and regulating AI, right? Which I'm an advocate for. Similarly, within controlled environment agriculture, there needs to be regulatory oversight and standardization around some of these processes. You can't do anything more outdoors, right? Like you can't filter the water that's coming out of the ground that's then turned around and used to water the plants, which is how a lot of these bacterial infections occur. And it's sad. It really is sad, because we should be able to prevent it. It hits home when you see kids, right? Little kids there. And I remember my first exposure to this was a video of a little kid from Canada who was on vacation with his parents in California, ate a salad, and I think it was Listeria, and rendered this child over the course of a few months into a vegetative state. Like a perfectly healthy little kid eats a salad, and their life changes.
And that's an example. I was doing some research, and in the Fast the Fast Company article, it talked about and this is in 2021, and it talked about from 17 to 18 to 19, every year it was getting worse.
Absolutely.
Which was an interesting pattern. But 1 out of 6 Americans a year are believed to get sickened by foodborne illnesses. 130,000 of them end up in the hospital. 3,000 die. That's a 9/11 every year just from food.
Just from food.
And the numbers in 19 was the worst on record, beating 2018, the previous holder, which beat 2017. It's going in the wrong direction. So I wanted to bring that out for Listeria and all the other bacteria, E. coli, et cetera, that is in our food. I'm going to thank you at this point in time. The topic is way larger than we're able to do on one podcast. So I want to thank you for shedding light on this, and we're going to welcome you back for another occasion to finish the conversation. Thank you so much.
Gene, sincerely, I appreciate it. And, your platform and ability to have this dialogue and the people that it will reach, I think is the reason that I'm most grateful for being on here. Because, when I was speaking earlier about informing and educating consumers about the value of being able to scan an item and get this detail on your food, it's very easy to detach from the human cause, the human purpose behind it, right? As I said at the beginning, I am a capitalist, and this is a massive venture, undertaking, a lot of money. With that being said, if you can save a life, if you can prevent, right, another instance of someone's life being altered, keep someone out of the hospital. And here's my number one behind all of it. You hear the phrase about food as medicine, right? That's being thrown around more and more today. Well, I believe, and where we are focused on, is moving it from the concept of food as medicine to the reality of food is medicine. You are what you eat. So if we can refine the process to ensure that the items that we can deliver are of the highest nutritional value, highest quality, right? And it doesn't break the bank for you to be able to get to it, which is when I referred earlier about accessibility, then what we should be able to envision is a healthier future for everybody, right? But it has to start someplace. And again, thank you for having me so that we could actually share this message, and we'll see what happens next.
The law firm of Halitzer, Pedersen Schwam is a proud sponsor of the Can We Talk 360 podcast. Our firm handles medical malpractice, wrongful death, and catastrophic personal injury litigation. We pride ourselves in being advocates for justice on behalf of those who have been seriously injured. For decades, we've taken the lead in making your case our priority. It's who we are. It's who we'll always be. Halitzer, Pedersen Schwam. Serious injuries, proven results.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Can We Talk 360. I sincerely hope that you are inspired to seize this moment in time and take real action towards change. Remember, all change begins with a conversation. Be sure to tune in every month for more fascinating discussions and motivational food for the soul. Please share with your friends, family, and colleagues. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Can We Talk 360, and visit us on the web at www.canwetalk360.com.